Welcome to another season of New York Jets coverage on the Ourlads Football Radio Network. Well, the time is now for this organization to make a relevant impact in the NFL again, and it starts with a camping trip on Thursday to the Atlantic Health Jets Training Center in Florham Park, New Jersey. So fasten your seatbelts, kick back, and get ready to fly with us all season long on what we promise will be an educational, exciting, and mostly enjoyable ride as the newly named Jets FM on the Ourlads Football Radio Network starts now. All right, it's Monday, July 23rd, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. Welcome to the 2018 football season premiere edition of Jets FM on the OFN at ourlads.com. Well, let's get the season started by first heading to my pit, where I'm fortunate to have two top wingmen join me all season, starting with RotoWire.com sports writer and former Jets season ticket holder Jan Levine. So, Jan, we'll both be airing, of course, a post-game show following every game. I certainly hope you're going to be there with me. I don't know about you, but I'm super stoked about the upcoming season, and I'm also stoked about doing the post-game shows, because what I really like about them is that we get to really inject our immediate reaction about what happens in the games every week. Just like you get when you stick a mic in the phone of a player or a coach right after the game. You're going to get juicy stuff a lot better than you will on the Monday press conferences. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it should be interesting. I'm sure some people will say that we have knee-jerk reactions as opposed to expert reactions, but that's part and parcel with doing it right after the game. And I think we'll provide enough insight in terms of our view of what we've seen in both the good and the bad, which I think we did a lot of last year as well when we had even a couple of days after the game, we had a similar view in terms of breaking it down and highlighting what we thought went well, what we thought didn't go well, and then also looking forward to either the next game or the next several games as well in terms of the impact on the team and the organization as a whole.
All right. Also joining us and new to our team this season is someone I've known since my radio days in South Florida. He's been covering New York Jets football for 29 consecutive seasons and has been the editor for the Jets Yearbook for 12 consecutive seasons. He's the current senior consultant and reporter for NewYorkJets.com, Randy Lang. Randy will join me during the week this season to update the team's top headlines on and off the field, as well as preview the team's upcoming games. Randy, it's great to have you on with us this season.
Hey, Greg. It's great to be here with you guys, and just coming off vacation, and just in time for the start of training camp this week, and I think we're all looking forward to it. We think it's got the potential for being not a 5-11 season, but being a much better season than that. How much better, remains to be seen, but we'll take a look at it and see where the Jets are headed this year.
Yeah, either way, I think it's going to be a fun ride, Randy. But before we get started and we break down the new coaches, new players, position by position as training camp starts on Thursday, I want to ask you about the recent news regarding the passing of former Jets coach Tony Sparano. Did you get to know Tony while he was in New York? And what can you tell us about him as a man as well as a coach?
Well, I didn't know Tony well because he was only with the Jets for the 2012 season as offensive coordinator. I think what happened was the Jets were mutually moving on from Brian Schottenheimer, who I believe interviewed with Jacksonville for a head coaching job at that same time. And Rex Ryan had his hands full with Tony Sparano's Miami Dolphins teams and offenses for 4 years or 3 years that he was there. And so the Jets decided to go with Sparano in 2012. And at the time, I know that Rex expressed a lot of respect and admiration for Tony's hard-nosed style. He's an East Coast guy. He's a Connecticut guy. Tony has that Brooklyn accent going. I don't know if it was the Brooklyn part of Connecticut that he came from, but he also had a hard-nosed mentality towards the game and liked what Rex always called the ground and pound approach. And definitely Tony brought that mentality with him, and I think the players liked him. Unfortunately, it only lasted for a year. The offense, the rushing offense, ranked 12th overall, with Sean Green doing a 1,000-yard season. I think it was his only 1,000-yard season. And a young rookie by the name of Bilal Powell starting out and getting his feet wet and doing well. The passing offense didn't do as well. And I think the overall offense was like 30th ranked in the NFL, overall 30th pass, 28th scoring. And so Tony moved on, but Tony was one of those guys in the NFL. You hear about him; he's popping up here, he's popping up there. He's doing a good job at shoring together some something he was thrown into the middle of, and then all of a sudden somebody says, "How about a head coach or a coordinator's position?" And he always had that thing going for him. It was just terribly unexpected news to hear that. On Sunday, or I guess it was a day earlier, he had passed away. And at the young age 56, we all miss him, and we wish his family the best in their time of need.
All right, let's go ahead and move on now to the camp battles, each position, and everything that we can bring you as far as analysis, updates, everything like that. So let's start, first of all, with the new coaches that are going to be important, especially position coaches. Jeremy Bates moves on as the coordinator now, and this is going to be very important, Randy, as far as the development of Sam Darnold, and maybe even Teddy Bridgewater if he's going to be around. This is still a young team. So what do you think about Jeremy Bates as the new coordinator?
Well, Jeremy Bates is a very intriguing prospect here for coordinator. It seems the Jets have been looking for that long-term coordinator pretty much since Schottenheimer left, and the fans had mixed feelings about him as well. So right now we're moving on to Jeremy Bates, and he's got a quarterback background, and he's an intense kind of guy, and I think the players so far definitely like what he's selling them, and that includes the quarterbacks, McCown and Bridgewater and Sam Darnold have all spoken well about how he communicates, how he teaches, and I think they're going to certainly the hope is that they're going to thrive, and the feeling is that there's a vibe on this offense, maybe not around the league, but certainly within the organization, that they can get some things done this year with Bates as the offensive coordinator. And then I don't want to go ahead of you on this, but I think you were going to mention Rick Dennison.
Sure, yeah.
And I know that Jeremy has spoken quite highly of Rick Dennison. They've worked together, I think, in Denver, and maybe out on the West Coast, I think. They've had their paths cross. One thing I wrote when Rick Dennison was signed to become the offensive line coach and / run game coordinator. I don't think the Jets have ever had a run game coordinator until this year. But the thing I wrote was that wherever Rick Dennison has been, it seems like a good running game and a good offense breaks out. He's been around the league a bit, and now he's with the Jets, and Bates knows him, respects him, likes what he's going to do in the running game, and so that seems like a good tandem to get the offense up and running this year.
Yeah, I like the fact that Dennison, who may or may not have been a very good coordinator, I don't think that's his best position. I think his best position is taking care of the offensive line and the running game, and he handles that well and works with Bates well. I think that's a good combination. All right, let's go ahead and go each position, and then Jan's going to jump in as well. First off, though, the quarterback position, Josh McCown was re-signed. Bridgewater was signed as a free agent. And Sam Darnold, of course, taken first by the Jets. So this is a much more exciting unit than the Jets had last year, Randy. And, of course, all the excitement and potential about Sam Darnold down the road. There's still a shot for him to win the job. I know Todd Bowles said that McCown's the number one quarterback. I'm not so sure either whether that's – I don't want to sit here and say whether that's a good idea or not. Or I just hope, of course – I mean, I'm fine with it as long as it is a true quarterback competition. There's no way, no reason in the world that Josh McCown should be given anything. With the way this organization needs to slowly turn over the keys to the engine to younger quarterbacks like Bridgewater or Darnold, but it's all dependent on Bridgewater and Darnold to do their job and steal that job from McCown.
All true, and McCown last year. I know a lot of writers, a lot of fans wanted to see Christian Hackenberg play, and even Bryce Petty. They got to see Bryce. They never got to see Christian, and he is now gone. But really, last year, I certainly thought that the call was valid. I mean, Josh McCown beat out the competition last year. He needed to start. Otherwise, you're just handing it to one or the other young player who really hadn't established himself in the preseason. But McCown, ran with that ball, and he showed, it wasn't a great season, a 5-8 season win-loss wise. But on the other hand, he had himself a career year in many different categories. Touchdown passes, touchdown runs. The accuracy was phenomenal, and I think 68.7% accuracy was among the best in the league. And he's a great leader and probably a potential NFL coach, and certainly a coach on the field as well. And he made that evident this offseason because you could see, you could wonder which way is McCown going to go. I mean, Ryan Fitzpatrick, when he was with the Jets in 15 and 16, had a great 15, and then 16 not so good. And which way is McCown going to go? So far, McCown has been so supportive of everything that the Jets have done. He loves the quarterback room. He respects the heck out of Teddy Bridgewater, and he's even gone up to me and to others in the organization, sight unseen, just said, "What do you think about that rookie?" And it's like, well, which rookie are you talking about? The quarterback? Yeah, he looks pretty good. So, whatever McCown sees as far as his future as a player, he's not letting that stand in the way of his future as a builder and as a proponent of a team personality. One team, one goal. That's the slogan that the Jets are going by, that Todd Bowles has instituted. And so the quarterback room itself seems to be strong. And really, the big storyline is going to be how fast does Sam Darnold progress. And I can't tell you the answer to that. I mean, McCown starts the preseason as number 1, Bridgewater 2, Darnold 3. But Darnold did look very good during the OTAs and during the minicamp. He definitely can make all the throws. He's intelligent. He doesn't make the same mistake twice. He gets a little ticked off at himself when he does make a mistake, which is, I think, good as long as you don't let it consume you. And he's loose enough to be in New York and yet focused enough to be what he wants to be, which is the long-term leader of the Jets offense and the Jets in general.
Randy, bridging off that, I guess my question is, and from what you've heard, what's the realistic possibility that twofold? One, that Bridgewater opens on the active list because obviously he's still recuperating from the major knee injury he had a couple of years ago. And then B, what's the possibility of him being the starter if he is fully healthy on day one, with McCown maybe taking a step back and Darnold continuing to develop, at least until the Jets determine the flip of the switch and putting Darnold in as the number 1 quarterback is the right move?
Yeah, those are good questions, Jan, because right now nobody really knows for sure what the prognosis is for Bridgewater. He looked very good in OTAs. He looked, I think, a lot better than a lot of writers and other observers thought he might, coming off of that devastating knee injury, which he only got back from in a marginal way last year, late in the season. But he looked good throwing the ball, had a tight pass, tight spiral, moved well on the run, which is one of his calling cards. So I would certainly not count him out of the, he's definitely, number 2 on the depth chart at the start of camp and could definitely move up if the circumstances call for it, if Todd Bowles and Jeremy Bates see him making that kind of progress. But the thing that the Jets have not said at all is that, well, we're grooming Teddy to possibly move him late in the off season to a team that really needs him and wants to give us something in return that will make it worth our while. That's not in the Jets' thinking, at least publicly now, but a lot of fans and a lot of writers have speculated that. So that's another one of those dynamic tension things, I think, in the quarterback depth chart story. But as of right now, he is one of the 3 on the Jets, and he could make that move. I don't know how good a move or how good a chance it is for him to unseat McCown as the starter and to hold back Darnold's progress. But I'd say that if he continues to make the improvement that he did during the OTAs in August, he's got a pretty good shot to to reclaim his role as a starting quarterback in the NFL somewhere, if not with the Jets, then somewhere else.
By the way, before we move on, we didn't see a lot of McCown last preseason. So do you think that happens again? And it's going to be all Bridgewater, all Darnold, and that because they know what they got out of McCown. I don't think he's going to do anything in the preseason, pro or con, to make a decision either way he should start or not. I mean, I don't think he's going to all of a sudden fall flat. So do you think, and especially because of his age, 39 years old, he could be the starter week one and he can go down at halftime. I mean, that has been his history. Let's just be real. Last year he was healthy, and that was unusual. So I don't think the Jets are going to mess with McCown in the preseason, right?
Well, you're probably right about that, Greg. That's kind of how they played it last year. I'd say the only reason that you might see more of McCown than you might think is because of the new offense under Jeremy Bates.
Okay.
Just to see that he can master it, and run the things that are a little different, from last year to this. So, but other than that, yeah, I think they know everything about him that they need to know. But as Josh says, it's always a growth process every year. So I know he doesn't want to leave it to chance. So there'll be that dynamic as to how much we're going to see Josh, and what does that foretell for his future. Will he be the starter if he doesn't play at all or very little in the preseason? Or, does that mean he's on his way to wearing the headset, being an assistant coach on the sideline?
Sure.
So we'll see all of that. But I'd say right now he's in a good place, and it's going to be one of the, I'm trying to remember a real legitimate quarterback battle with the Jets, quarterback competition. We had one in 2006, but it really wasn't much of one. That was the first Eric Mangini season when Chad Pennington took on Kellen Clemens, Patrick Ramsey, and Brooks Bollinger. I think Eric called that a four-man quarterback competition, but it really was Pennington's to win, and he won it. But before that, I mean, where do you go? You go to Pennington and Testaverde in 2000, and Ray Lucas was there too, and you got your Richard Todd and Ken O'Brien in '83. I mean, they really haven't had that many serious quarterback competitions. I think this is one of them.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And the talent, too. This is the best talent I think we've ever seen, 1 through 3 in a Jet quarterback room. Let's go to running back. A lot of changes here with Isaiah Crowell being brought in as a free agent. And that is going to be a big boost, especially since the Jets were a little bit older there last year. And so now they move in. They get a little bit fresh blood with Crowell. They also, of course, have year 2 of McGuire. Powell will be back. They bring in Rawls as a free agent. They draft Trenton Cannon, the Division II player who's very fast, has got kick return skills. That's going to have to be his trademark if he makes the team. And then also we've got the fullback battle between rookie free agent Dimitri Flowers and Lawrence Thomas, which I think we all believe Flowers probably has a leg up there on that competition. But, again, I think this is a better running back room, experience more from McGuire, a little bit more depth than last year, especially experience-wise, Randy. And then just overall, when you can replace – a player right now that is retired with another player, Isaiah Crowell, who's in the prime of his career, that's definitely a leg up.
Yeah, I like the acquisition of Crowell, and I don't know that, veteran scouts would agree with me on this, but I liken his position at this stage of his career to that of Chris Ivory several years ago when he came to the Jets from the Saints. And he had that vibe about him that he couldn't win the starting job in New Orleans, but he seemed to have something a little more than the usual backup running back in this league. And he came to the Jets, Ivory, and did a really good job for several years, and of course moved on. Now he's going to be challenging them with the Bills, I think. But I like Crowell for the same kinds of reasons. Younger, he's a pound it back. He's a guy who's going to run into the line, and he's going to run people over. But he has a little bit of that evasiveness at the line to make people miss. And all of a sudden, the guy's on a 60-yard jaunt which is what Ivory did a lot. So I don't know if that's going to translate exactly, but I kind of like that injection of Crowell into the Jets offense, similar to what Ivory did a few years ago. And I like the combination with Bilal Powell. Bilal is not done yet. He probably would like to be the bell cow, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen this year. But they're going to share the duties, and that will make both of them, I think, better. And it could be a strength of this offense that, as you say, has gotten younger and is going to still run the ball with authority like they have for a long time, whether it be Curtis Martin, Thomas Jones, Freeman McNeil. They've had a good run of running backs with the Jets, and this could be another good room for them.
Ernie, how do you foresee the breakout in terms of playing time to kind of split? Do you see Crowell as the bell cow back and Powell to spell him? Does Powell get the opportunity now to finally kind of be the number one back, which we've been waiting for the last couple of years, with Matt Forte there, with Crowell backing him up? And then also, how do you see Elijah McGuire kind of being used associated with those two backs? Is he going to be the spot back and used periodically? Is it something where he potentially could be on the bubble, given some of the other moves that they've made? Just kind of how do you foresee the whole dynamic and the whole utilization panning out amongst the three of them?
Yeah, especially McGuire, Randy. Talk about his role and also whether or not, how important it is maybe for him to possibly win a punt return job or a kick return job, because I think that's what Jets would rather see is one of their skill position players, running back, wide receiver, win those jobs. So Lucky Whitehead and Andre Roberts don't have to be on the team because that's all they do is return kicks. And they'd much rather have that spot to somebody that has a more diverse skill set like McGuire.
Yeah. I don't know how it's going to shake out as far as the number one running back and the split, as far as carries. I could see that, Crowell definitely thinks he would like to be that every down back. He's talked about, I think, being a little frustrated in Cleveland where, he certainly showed the talent to do that, but they always split his time with, who's it, Duke Johnson, I believe?
Correct.
Duke Johnson. So, he never really had that ball for 300 or I don't think 250 carries, but he always was getting close to 1,000 yards and producing in the passing game too. So I think he's going to get a shot to be the main man, but I think Bilal Powell is just still too good to cede all of those carries to Isaiah Crowell. So I think Bilal definitely factors in at third down because he's also an outstanding pass receiver out of the backfield and can make people miss on run plays. And then you've got Elijah, who, showed that he's got a little bit of, what the Jets want out of a backup running back and a possible returner. Stump Mitchell made some headlines here in the offseason by comparing Elijah McGuire's skill set to that of LaDainian Tomlinson. Now, he wasn't saying that that Elijah's ready to go to the Hall of Fame in 10 years, but I think he saw a little bit of what LaDainian brought to the table in versatility and the ability to make people miss and to be very productive in the running game. So you've got three running backs who any one of them could step in if called on. Elijah did have a decent, not a great rookie season. I think his average was down in the low threes or high twos, but he did make a couple of big plays that were very important. And so he shows that promise. And as you say, he could be. He was used as a kick returner last year. It's up in the air now who's going to win that job, and we'll get to that down the road here when we talk. But you got McGuire, you got Trenton Cannon, and as you mentioned, the other ones who are more specialty guys, Lucky Whitehead, Andre Roberts, and even our Darius Stewart who did it last year. So I think it's one of those positions of strength at running back. You can never have enough good running backs. I think the Jets are in that position this year.
Yeah, and I also think that what we could see if Thomas Rawls has a very good preseason, Trenton Cannon looks like he could contribute in some way, even if he's originally going to start the season on the practice squad. it wouldn't surprise me. I mean, everybody's talking about trading Bridgewater, and of course, you would get. I don't think the Jets would trade Bridgewater unless they get a second, maybe a third. But I don't think that they would be shy about trading Bilal Powell if a team lost a running back and they wanted a running back, and the Jets felt they could get something valuable in return as far as a draft pick because of the depth they have at this position. Randy.
Yeah, that's a very good point, and I didn't mention Thomas Rawls, who had a very good season a few years ago, I think as a rookie with Seattle, and hasn't met those numbers since, but still is very talented, and he could fit into the picture too, or he could be the odd man out. We don't know. So that's what training camp's all about. But like you said, and like I said, I like what the Jets are showing at running back. To me, that's right now the strength of the offense. The wide receivers could be that, but there's still many questions there. And, of course, quarterback, we want to see who's going to end up with the ball on opening day or opening night against Detroit.
And quickly, again, Flowers, because he has a lot more experience at the fullback position and especially in the receiving game, he should be the favorite to win the fullback job, right?
Well, I was very impressed with Flowers during the OTAs. Yes, he's a bright guy, and he showed a lot of versatility at Oklahoma. It was Oklahoma State. Yeah. Anyway.
Oklahoma,
that's right. And then, but Lawrence Thomas has been one of those, guys you can't get rid of. He stuck around. He was defensive lineman when he came to the Jets 2 years ago, got hurt, came back last year. They moved him to fullback. He looked very good, very comfortable because he played fullback back in early college. I think he came to Michigan State. I'm sorry with the colleges here, but he went to college as a fullback out of high school. So he certainly has experience there. He's looked good in the past. It'll be a good battle. I like what Dimitri Flowers is bringing to the table for that competition.
All right, let's move on to tight end now. And Leggett coming back from the injury. Chris Herndon is coming off a little bit of bad off-season news, which you'll get into. He's in the competition, the rookie, as is Clive Walford, the 2015 third-round draft pick for Oakland. And he's only 26 years old, so in my opinion, that's what the battle's down to. Leggett, Herndon, Walford. We know unless something drastic happens to Herndon that he's definitely going to be in the top three. So, and we know Leggett's going to be in the top three. But that means that Clive Walford is probably going to have to battle Tomlinson, Sterling, and Bucky Hodges for that final position, even though it wouldn't surprise me if Clive Walford even won the job. He's got talent, and he's with a new team. And again, he's young enough. So this is a very interesting group, a lot of young guys and a lot of guys that know that there's a job opening.
Yeah, we don't know much about Leggett at the moment. He missed a lot of last season, was used very sparingly early on and then got hurt. And so there's promise there, but he was a fifth-round pick, and he still has to establish himself and show that he's the guy. Clive Walford, definitely a waiver pickup from Oakland, looks decent. We don't know again. I mean, we got a battle here. Chris Herndon had the issue off the field, and he's coming back from that. And as far as we know, I mean, he's okay. He's a part of the team, and so we'll see what happens as far as any discipline. But I think.
But chances are, if he's going to get disciplined, it won't be until next year.
I would guess so, but I'm not following the NFL's procedures. Sometimes it seems like they just decide, all right, it's time to make to establish some discipline for this incident or that one, or 2 years ago, this year. I'm not sure what's ahead for him, but he's definitely got promise as a receiver. Leggett had worked on blocking last year. I think Walford's more of a blocker. Tomlinson definitely is a blocker, and showed that he could also long snap in a pinch last year. So he's got some value. And Neil Sterling and Bucky Hodges, as you mentioned, are also on the depth chart. But as of right now, it looks like Leggett, Walford, Herndon would be the top three, and I can't really handicap it for you. I don't know who's going to win it. I'd say Leggett is probably going in as number one, but we're going to have a lively competition at tight end.
And this is one of the areas that Greg and I disagree on. I was one of those who was a big proponent of bringing back Austin Seferian-Jenkins, especially seeing the contract he got from Jacksonville. I guess my question to you on this is A, are you a bit surprised to match the offer that he got? And then secondly, with the discussion you guys had initially on Dennison, do you ever see the Jets going kind of two tight end at times, using a heavy blocking scheme to get the ground attack going and maybe free up some of the wide receivers to get some spacing or some freedom in terms of getting into the defensive gaps?
Yeah, I think the observers around the team were hopeful that Austin Seferian-Jenkins would re-sign. The contracts did not. The offer from the Jets and the contract that he did sign didn't seem to be ridiculously far apart. But it was a decision, obviously, that the Jets made to not pursue it. And then you have to say, well, that seems to be a vote of confidence for who they have on the roster. That they worked with Austin Seferian-Jenkins for a few years, and then it was time to move on. So, as far as the two tight end possibility, I'd say yes, probably. And that bodes well for keeping a guy like Tomlinson, even though that's perhaps a fourth tight end. I don't think there'll be four tight ends on the roster, but he's down on the depth chart at the moment. But he could be one of those guys. And of course, the Jets, even though this is a new offense with new coaches, have used the fullback in a variety of roles too, which might bode well for Dimitri Flowers as far as being a move tight end type guy or an H-back, moving out of the fullback position. So, but yeah, I could see a lot of heavy packages with the running backs that they have, and trying to move the ball on the ground when you might think they were going to toss it, just because that's where their strength lies, and that could be in the future.
All right, and also I would interested to see what kind of progress Bucky Hodges makes. Let's keep in mind he came out of college early, 22 years old, 6'6", 257. He was a high school quarterback. The kid needs time to develop. Wouldn't be surprised if he was on the practice squad to start the season, but don't think that Bucky Hodges doesn't have a role down the line with this team. He's an intriguing prospect. Let's go to wide receiver. You got Kearse, Anderson, and Enunwa. Those are your top three. With Anderson, of course, it's just about staying out of trouble. He says all the right things, but you got to believe, and I certainly hope, that if anything happens again, that the Jets just get rid of that problem. But let's hope that doesn't happen again. Enunwa, it's about his health and returning to play. See how long it takes him to get back into the rhythm. Pryor was signed as a one-year free agent pickup, so they didn't have to spend much for a talent like that, who was injured last year. But I'm really excited about Chad Hansen. I don't think there's any question he's way ahead of Adarius Stewart. I think if Stewart is going to contribute on this team, I think he has to contribute on special teams, especially in the kick return role, to, again, make sure Whitehead or Roberts isn't on this team. They also have Peak and free agent Charles Johnson. So it's a very deep unit. It's come a long way from a few years ago when there were receivers on this team that we had no idea who they were, Randy.
Yeah, well, that's true, and we remember those days. Greg Salas, I remember. We've got a bunch of guys who.
Don't try to remember them.
No, let's not go there. But the guys that they have on this roster, you wouldn't say it looks like a great wide receiver group, but I think it's got potential, and I think a lot of that potential probably goes, falls on Quincy Enunwa's shoulders. Hopefully not too hard because he had the neck injury last year. But everything that we hear points to him improving. He's healthy. He was running around in the OTAs. They're going to make that final decision as far as when they can turn him loose, but it sounds as if he's ready to take, to get back into the harness and take on a full role. People were talking about him as possibly being the number one receiver for the Jets last year before he got hurt. I don't know if that's the way it'll shake out, because a lot of people now see Robbie Anderson as being that guy as long as he could stay away from suspensions or anything. It seems like he might, but again, that's up to the NFL to determine whether he's going to sit a game or two or none. But
The only thing with
Robbie
Robbie Anderson is I don't see him as he's not an NFL number one receiver. He might be the Jets' number one receiver. He's not a
Right.
very good move the chains receiver. He's basically a guy who can get deep. He can make plays when he gets his hand on the ball. That's a number two at best guy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think your point is that there's no star number really, take charge number one guy on the team, even though Enunwa has the possibility of developing into that guy.
Yeah, all that's very true. I think Robbie showed a little bit more of the move the chains dimension later in the season before McCown got hurt, because Robbie really didn't have much production after McCown went down against Denver. But before that, he had 17 20-yard pass completions, but he also started to, move the chains a little bit. So, but yeah, I mean, as far as being, the next number one guy in the NFL, he's got a way to go on that. But as a group, you've got Robbie Anderson, who can be the downfield threat. Jermaine Kearse showed a nice possession, a professional possession receiver type presence, and played off of Robbie well last year. And Quincy, if he can fit in, also a very good possible third wide receiver, second wide receiver, a guy with great yards after the catch dimension, which he showed against the Patriots in 2016 to help pull out that overtime game in 2015, excuse me. So you've got those three guys probably lining up, at the head of the class. Terrell Pryor certainly has a track record. Didn't have a great season with Washington last year, but has shown that he can play on this level, obviously, as a wide receiver and not just as a quarterback. And I like Chad Hansen too. He showed, possession, receiver hands, and showed that he could step in a pinch late in the season. And now he's going to get a chance, I think, to show what he can do as a more prominent receiver in the offense.
I think you covered a lot of my questions that I was going to ask, but I'll focus more on Terrell Pryor. I mean, to me, he was a guy a couple of years ago that clearly looked to potentially be a number one. With Enunwa coming back, with Anderson there, how do you foresee the Jets kind of using Pryor as he fills in as the number three? Do you see him being the number one with everybody else moving down the pecking order? Obviously, kind of depends on how healthy he is. But to me, Pryor has all the skills to potentially be a quote-unquote true number one. How do you foresee kind of the Jets utilizing him on the squad this year?
Yeah, I think, well, that's true because I remember researching him, and I think he's like the only player in the NFL to have a 90-yard reception, 70-yard reception, and a 50-yard reception all in the last 3 or 4 years. He shows a great explosive dimension, and in that regard, then, I mean, obviously he could be somebody to either spell Robbie Anderson or to team up with him and create headaches for teams down the field. As far as where he fits in, I don't know what we're going to see out of him because he was somewhat limited in the off season, still coming back from the foot problem that he had with the Redskins that I think KO'd the last 7 games of his season there. But he's another guy who they brought in. They're going to look at him. He's talented. He's proven that he can produce on this level. And so, I mean, I would expect to see a lot of him in the preseason just to see how he fits in, as you say, and then we'll find out if he's, if he's the guy that you want to keep and go forward with and create, a really, I would say, a really diversified wide receiver group.
All right, and again, part of that is Stewart. Is there a chance that Stewart, his job on the team, as deep as this receiver group is, could be in jeopardy, especially with him being out a couple of games?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case. The Jets certainly don't communicate or telegraph those things. Anybody who can't produce for whatever reason faces that possibility. But I think Ardarius also showed in flashes last year that he can be productive. So I think he'll get that opportunity. But definitely it's not going to help that he's going to sit for 2 games at the start of the season. Sharon Peake's another guy we mentioned, who also had flashes 2 years ago of producing, especially on 3rd and 4th downs. You love to have that dimension, somewhere in your depth chart. But, he's going to be up against it after sitting out most of last season with an injury. So, there are very good prospects on this unit. as far as being a dynamic unit in the NFL, they need to prove that. They need to go out and show that all these parts are going to fit together well under Jeremy Bates.
All right, let's quickly get through the rest because we're way behind. Let's go offensive line, and we know what the unit's going to be, with the exception of Spencer Long coming in as a free agent at center, so that should be a big improvement. Winters staying healthy, Shell developing, and hopefully Beecham and Carpenter on the left side having better seasons than last season's. I also am interested in some of the backups. Of course, Garcia brought in the former Patriot, Austin Golson, the free agent, the rookie, and Ben Braden, who was on the practice squad last year. Those are guys I'm very interested in taking a look at.
Yeah, I like, similar to the wide receivers, I think. We have 5 guys who probably will be the starters. We don't know if they're going to be a dynamic offensive line, but I think they have the potential to come together and to be a very strong offensive line, especially for what Bates wants to do, running the ball, protecting the quarterback. Beecham, James Carpenter, Spencer Long, Brian Winters, Brandon Shell. You want to see Shell continue to develop. You want to see Winters stay healthy. I think he gutted out most of last season with an injury, the torn groin area situation, but he continued to play through it. He's a tough guy, but a full season of health would be great for him and for the development of the offensive line.
All right, and have you heard anything at all from any of the young guys that they have a legitimate chance to produce on the team, Garcia, Braden, and Golson, or is it way too early?
I haven't heard a lot. I mean, I know a few writers talked to Garcia. He definitely seems to have, some interesting, an interesting skill set to bring to the table. But I don't think we know yet what he can contribute. Ben Braden's been around for a while. He's also on the inside teaming up with guys like Dakota Dozier. Travis Swanson was brought in from Detroit, who also, like Spencer Long, was a starting center and guard in this league. So, he's got experience, and he's going to, be valued depth and at the position. Jonathan Harrison back, so he's another guy. It's another crowded, roster, a crowded room. But as far as what's ahead for Garcia yet, and guys like Dakota Shepley, can he win a job? He was an excellent Canadian Football League guy, or a college Football League guy who was drafted by the CFL, I should say. But you've got a lot of interesting guys on the line, and they're going to push the starters, and I think that makes for a potentially good group.
Jan?
Sorry, I think Randy, the guy you touched on is who I'm interested in, Swanson. My view is I wouldn't be shocked, and tell me if I'm completely off base here, where Swanson ends up being the starter, either a guard or center, with Long staying at center or moving to guard, and then maybe shifting some of the offensive line to provide a bit more depth there. To me, that kind of gives them the best of both worlds, where you have a guy who's played both positions, been a starter at both positions, and can move guys out if they're underperforming.
Yeah, I like that thought, and I was thinking the same kind of thing. There's just I think a general a tendency to say Travis Swanson's not going to start, but he has been a starter, and I think they brought him in similar to what the Jets have done at other positions to build the depth at the positions. So it's not necessarily that he's viewed as a backup as much as he's viewed as somebody to challenge and push the starters and to maybe win a starting job. And that would be very interesting if there is an injury to Winters, or James Carpenter's been pretty indestructible. But what happens if James were to go down? You've got some options there at guard with Spencer Long and or Travis Swanson and or Dakota Dozier. So you've got those options. You've got depth at the position. That's something I think that was an accent of Todd Bowles and Mike McCagnon and the personnel people to build the depth at certain positions, such as on the offensive line.
Yeah, the key, though, too, is the development of some of these younger players, whether a Braden or a Garcia can actually develop into a solid NFL starter. I think we know what we have from some of the veterans on the team, and then also Rick Dennison, who we talked about. That could be huge as far as changing over to a little bit more of a zone blocking scheme and how quickly it's going to take these guys to develop. And learn how to play together, because it takes a lot longer to develop chemistry with that zone blocking scheme than the power scheme. So anyway, that's something to keep an eye on. Let's switch over to defense. The defensive line. Leonard Williams, of course, is the star of the unit. Henry Anderson was brought in a trade. That was a big boost as far as bringing his talents in, as long as he could stay healthy, Randy. And then you also have the rookies, including Nathan Shepard, and then Steve McClendon, who had a pretty good season, Mike Pennell, a couple of good free agents, a couple of good veterans that'll help on the interior. So again, maybe not the star power that they used to have, but they're deeper than they were last year.
Yeah, they are. Leonard Williams needs a breakout year. He didn't have as strong a year last year. I think that initially started out because he had a hand injury that just held him back, prevented him from doing a lot of his hand work and getting penetration the way he was his previous 2 years. But Leonard Williams, I think, is the real deal, and I think he knows he needs to establish that or reestablish that this year. And he wants all those things that big time defensive linemen want. Pro Bowl, big contract. This is one of those years to start to really make your case for those things. And teamed up with McClendon, a veteran who I don't think is done yet. I mean, he's getting older, but he's a rock in the middle. Henry Anderson, very versatile, very good pickup late in the draft, the trade with the Colts. And Xavier Cooper and Mike Pennell both showed in limited roles that they, can get the job done. And then you bring in Polonso Patukasi, who is going to give fans a mouthful to work with all season, and Nathan Shepard, the third-round pick. These guys could be part of the answer, although I certainly don't know that yet. We have to see in training camp and in the season. But where's the pass rush going to come from? That's been an annual question for the Jets for a while. Is it going to come from the defensive line, the interior defensive linemen, or the five technique guys? Shepard and Fatukasi may have a lot to say about that too.
It cuts on the guy I really liked was Henry Anderson in terms of a move. But I guess my question is with the depth now in the middle, is Deion Simon now clearly on the bubble? Is kind of question one. And then question two is you talked about obviously the lack of a pass rush, and we'll kind of get to a bit more of it when we go to linebackers. But is that something you think that the Jets are going to target either in free agency or in the draft next year, which is something they really haven't focused on in the past couple of seasons?
Yeah, do they have an explanation for that, Randy? I mean, seriously, it just drives me crazy, not just for draft picks or free agency, but even rookie free agents. I mean, I'm sitting there and I'm scratching my head saying, how in the world does Denver get Jeff Holland? I mean, they need another linebacker with pass rushing skills, and here we go. There's just nothing on this team, with experience or with the type of talent that is going to do anything for the Jets this year. I mean, it's almost like they've got some kind of plan, and they feel like they don't need those players. They could say what they want, but they don't go after them.
Yeah, I think that's probably the view from the outside. I think on the inside, you're right. They do have a plan. I mean, whether the plan works out, hey, plans in the NFL, are a dime a dozen. You gotta implement the plan and then execute it. Part of the plan for the pass rush, if we want to jump to linebacker briefly,
sure,
is Lorenzo Malden ready to come back after a year away?
That would be big.
He looked like he might be that guy. He says, I talked to him this year, he says he wants to be that guy. He can be that guy. Well, let's see if he's the guy.
Yep.
You've got Jordan Jenkins, not really a pass rush type on the strong side outside, but has shown that capacity. Can he be more of a factor there? Inside, I don't know if you're going to get much pass rush from Darren Lee and Avery Williamson, but, Darren Lee has shown that ability. So, but are they going to, basically, hammer together another pass rush, or is somebody going to step forward and be that guy? I mean, Leonard Williams, you would think, is going to lead the charge.
Sure.
But he has to have that year. He cannot have another 2-sack season. Let's put it that way.
And the Jets have boatload of cash coming up next year. So if there's going to be one player that's going to benefit the most from that money, it's going to be Leonard Williams. So like you said, he's going to target this season as his season to cash in. But, hey, you know what? Opposing defenses are probably going to double and triple team them. That's going to open up spots for other players, and that'll be Todd Bowles' job to figure out how to get to the quarterback. And you talked about the linebackers, and we can even go into Darren Lee with the linebackers because, of course, we're waiting for him to develop. And I talked about this with Jan last year. Even though I have been extremely critical of Darren Lee on a biweekly basis, the one thing that I do defend him with is he's very young. Just kind of like what I said, kind of in another circumstance, would say a Bucky Hodges. I mean, Darren Lee's a young kid. I'm willing. I mean, he would have basically come out of college this year as a senior. So I am willing to believe and hope that he just needed a few years. And maybe now this will be the year. What I don't want to hear, though, we're going to hear it, but I don't want to the press clippings and the talking up about what kind of things are going to be different. I don't want to hear any of that. Jet fans don't want to hear any of that. Just produce on the field.
Yeah, and you're going to need to see it on the field before you, after you hear a lot more of those platitudes.
Yeah,
because I can tell you that Todd Bowles has definitely kind of, I think Walt Michaels always had that phrase, hang the hat on somebody. I think Todd is putting the hat on Darren Lee this year by saying of course, Todd was saying he had an outstanding finish last year. I don't know if that's too strong a word, but I thought Darren came around, but Todd likes him, and this year he says it's time for him to step up on the field as a leader, and so definitely there's a little pressure on Darren Lee to perform up to his number one draft status. And he's into it, I think. But as far as, where he's going to make his impression, where he's going to make his presence felt, I think he needs to show he's better in coverage. He needs to be more consistent in moving forward because he did play in the backfield a little bit over the first two seasons. But I think he needs to do more of that, and I'd like to see more of that too. So he's definitely one of those guys on the defense that is going to be a lightning rod for fans, good and bad. He might spark the defense or, some lightning bolts may strike him, but he's going to be a guy that a lot of fans and coaches and writers are going to be focusing on to see how he improves himself and the defense this year.
Yeah, the guy that I think may be somewhat critical is him, Pierre Lewis, who they kind of picked up late. And you talked about the lack of a pass rush, which has been a major issue, even when we had the quote-unquote trinity at defensive line that we thought was going to be, a major game changer. And right now, as you mentioned, Lorenzo Malden is a question mark in terms of what he can do. I think Darren Lee moving inside. I mean, one of the things I was going to ask about, and you covered it, to me, this is a huge year for him, as you said, proving he can be a number one, and then him proving he can get the big money. But kind of how do you foresee them using Pierre Lewis? Is something where they'll line him up on the outside and go with a 3-4 and use him as a situational pass rusher, or is it something you see him playing a bit more steadily than maybe coming in just more on regular passing downs?
Well, I would say probably situational pass rusher, but the Jets, again, with what we've talked about, their approach to building depth, they have thrown a lot of linebackers at this position. You've got Kevin Minter came in, Neville Hewitt, Pierre Lewis you mentioned. A guy I didn't mention who has been around for a year, Dylan Donahue, is another somebody that they have hopeful of producing a pass rush on the outside. But he's been around. But you've got a lot of guys here who, were not with the team last year. Maybe they're here to fill in on special teams and just to provide some depth and some spelling of the starters on defense. But there's a lot of guys fighting for jobs here who've played in the league. So I'm very interested to see, how Pierre Lewis fits in. I don't know how he'll fit in exactly. Neville Hewitt. David Bass is back, although he was a free agent, but he came back to the Jets. He's another guy who showed a little bit, again, a flash or two or three early in his Jets tenure. So there's a lot of players on this team at linebacker, a lot of linebackers who've played in the league. We're going to need to see how they sort themselves out in training camp. And I'm not sure, other than the starters, who we're going to see as the second tier of guys when opening day gets here.
Yeah, there's again, like some of these other positions, there is a lot of depth at linebacker, but you just wonder about the quality of the depth. And you mentioned some of those guys, Hewitt, Lewis, Josh Martin, Kevin Minter. These guys could wind up just being big, role players and special teams guys. You throw in Courtney Upshaw and David Bass. Those guys are contributors. None of those guys are going to turn any heads. I think the only guy that has a chance to turn heads are Malden, Lee, and Dylan Donahue. I think we know what we got with everybody else, including Williamson. We know what they can do. We know what they can't do. Jenkins and Williamson and all the others. I just think the Malden, Lee, and Donahue are the only guys that can take that next step.
They can, and it would really behoove them, as far as, being professional football players and being Jets to do it. There's an opening there. There's a need there. The Jets, I think, finished something like 30th in pass rush percentage of, pass plays getting to the quarterback last year.
Yeah.
They did get some hits on the quarterback, mostly with Leonard Williams. They need more of that because they don't get that. And the back end, which has been fortified, which we'll talk about in a second, is going to not look as good if it doesn't get that help from the front seven.
Yeah.
And so there's a possibility, again, for this defense to be good, maybe very good, but it needs a lot of help in that front seven to support the back end.
Well, what I like is that even though, as Jan mentioned, the trinity that the team used to have, the problem with that was, as it didn't fit what Todd Bowles wanted to do. And what he wanted to do is he wanted to have his impact back in the deep end. He wanted to have a lot of good cover guys, in his back seven. And I think that's what we're seeing now. And so there's a lot more depth now in the back seven, and especially at the secondary. So even though the talent may not be there like it was a few years ago with those stars up front, I think this fits better with Todd Bowles and what he wants to do. And so it is up to guys like Tremaine Johnson, who was brought in to pair with Claiborne, May, and Adams. And that could be an excellent four. And if Buster Screen continues to develop at nickel, and then you got Perry Nickerson, who could take over that spot, it's very intriguing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, do you want to segue to the secondary? We can do that right now because, I've called it a position of strength, and it really has become that. But again, you can't do it on paper. Tremaine Johnson is now one of the highest-paid corners in the league. And, he's a fixture there on one side. And you got Morris Claiborne coming back, had a decent year last year. Perhaps, after I think it was about 5 seasons with the Cowboys where everybody's waiting for him to explode. I think maybe he's building towards something bigger in his career, we hope. And so you got your corners set, Buster Screen playing behind them in the nickel. He's a hot and cold guy. I know a lot of fans love him. A lot of fans hate him. He's a great team player. He does commit penalties, but he also comes up with some big games. And I think he's definitely a factor on this team. And then in the deep middle, Jamal Adams, Marcus May, backed up now by J.J. Wilcox, who came in during the offseason because of the need for backups when Rontez Miles got hurt. And Rontez is still around, although he's rehabbing. It's going to take a few months to get back on his feet. But you've got Wilcox, and then they just signed Brandon Bryant, who was undrafted in the supplemental draft, who's another prospect. And then I could throw out Terrence Brooks, who re-signed and showed some promise on special teams as well as in coverage. So,
and the two draft picks from last year, too, the 2 6th-rounders, Derek Jones and Jeremy Clark. We're hoping that they could develop.
That's true.
And then you got Burris.
Is still there, but he's taken a while. But again, it's a good front group. It's a good front four, and maybe front five if you count Buster in, and some good depth, but it's got to develop. But this is a unit that could play some excellent pass defense, but it's going to need help from the front seven. And is that help forthcoming in the pass rush? We don't know. So it's going to be a very interesting development, and it's going to be interesting to see how the defense balances as we go forward into the season. Against Detroit, and then we got Miami, and we got Cleveland, and we got Jacksonville in Game 4. So they're going to be tested early on.
Dan.
I think the guy that I'm most interested in on the defensive back side is Nickerson. I'm wondering kind of your view is his arrival kind of starting the drum beats of the departure of Buster Skrine down the road? Is Nickerson somebody, despite his smaller stature, that can stand up as kind of a nickel back, or do you foresee him kind of just being used as more of a return guy and maybe a spot guy coming in there, or is there something where the Jets project him to be more of a guy who can play maybe 30 or 40% of the downs?
Well, I definitely liked Nickerson coming out of college, and as a sixth rounder, I thought it was a really good pickup. He I think was injured his first season, then had 4 very productive seasons at Tulane.
Yes.
And so I liked what he I like what he brings to the table. Could he push Buster? I'm sure he will. But Buster's a proud pro, and I'm sure he's going to push back. So, but definitely Parry Nickerson factors into the big picture in the secondary, and especially down the road, the Jets would like to get one of those lower round guys that they did a lot of research on. You mentioned Burris and Clark and Derek Jones. See 1 or 2 of those guys come through in a big way, and settle that position down so they don't have to go out and pick up a big name free agent every year, or draft high and in the draft every year just to fix that position. So I think definitely Parry Nickerson's got a chance to step up and make a good home for himself, not just an afterthought, but as a contributor to the secondary.
And what's the status on Rashad Robinson? Do you think he's going to? You think they're going to try him a little bit everywhere? I mean, he's a big guy. I don't know if he's a corner. I just don't. And but then again, he's got good size. And I'm sure that's what intrigued them. And they gave up, a decent draft pick for him. He's got those red flags. His off the field issues and didn't really look good at all when he played. So, but he's got a whole new offseason with the staff. And he's got to stay out of trouble, of course. So have you heard anything at all regarding him?
I've heard nothing regarding Rashard other than what you just talked about, which is he came to the Jets and didn't look great in the times that we noticed him. And he's had a full off season working with Casey Rogers. And, it's going to be interesting to see if he can develop into the player that I think San Francisco thought he was, and then when the Jets traded for him, the player that they thought he could become. But he's definitely going to have to earn his keep. He's not going to be given an automatic backup job at nickel, or he's not going to automatically factor into the play. He's going to have to make his way among all of the guys we just mentioned and show that he is that guy that everybody thought he was coming out from college, and also the guy that the Jets thought he was when they traded for him last year.
All right, and then finally on special teams, Santos is the new kicker for now at least. He's got to stay healthy. I think if he does that, he's got a boatload of talent he showed in college, so I'm excited about seeing what he's got. Edwards had a really good improvement last year, so they have the makings of a duo, a good young duo that could be around for a while, and that would be great for the organization. They haven't had that in a while. And then we already mentioned special teams, the kick return game. I honestly believe, as of today, I would be surprised if Lucky Whitehead or Andre Roberts were on the team. I just don't think the Jets, where their development is right now, they're not the Patriots. They don't have the luxury of having one of these specialty players. I think the Jets would rather have McGuire or Cannon or Stewart take those roles because they could also contribute at running back or wide receiver.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think you're right. And, additionally, the good thing about the kicking game is it seems to be, even though they lost Chandler Catanzaro after 1 year last year, it had a decent year. I think Cairo Santos is similar in his production in his career. He did come in with, I think it was a groin that he had with the Bears, but he actually kicked pretty well with the Bears, even though he was bothered by that for most of his stay. And then he had a decent, run with the Chiefs. So I think he can be okay, although we did not see him kick in the OTA. So when you see him kick in training camp. That'll be like the first meaningful placements that he's taken and kickoffs that he's made since coming over. And if he were to stumble, they have Taylor Bertolet on the roster, but it's definitely Cairo, his job to seize. And Lachlan Edwards, even though he's not perfect, he's not a finished product yet, he showed a great stride from year one to year two. He set the Jets franchise records for net and gross yardage for their punter. I think Curly Johnson held them for at least the net punting for about 40 or 50 years.
There you go.
So Lachlan is definitely the future punter. Thomas Hennessy has established himself as the long snapper. So those positions, I think, are good. We just have to see what Cairo produces in August as the kicker, and then also we're going to keep an eye on those returners. The Jets have not had a consistent kickoff returner or punt returner since Santana Moss and Joe McKnight. It's been a while, and I know that Brant Boyer, the special teams coordinator, has even said that we want to find those guys who can be consistent. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on all of those players that we've mentioned: Elijah McGuire, Trenton Cannon, Darius Stewart. They're all going to be under the gun to show that they can be those returners and earn their keep that way.
I think you got a lot of the questions I was going to cover. I mean, I have to admit that Greg was 100% right in Cannizzaro last year, and I was 100% wrong. I wasn't happy with that move after seeing Folk go, and then he and I were both a little disappointed that he didn't come back, but granted the contract he got. We knew the Jets weren't going to match. I'm just wondering, I haven't never been a huge Cairo Santos fan. I think he is the incumbent, but I do think, as you mentioned, that Bertolet, if he has a good camp, and Santos is struggling, I wonder if they make that switch. And has anybody ever heard from Ross Martin again?
From Ross Martin, yeah. I thought actually Ross might be invited. I don't know that he always gets an invite about either late after the draft or at this time as we head to training camp. I think he's been with us a couple of years, but no, we haven't heard from Ross Martin. Taylor, it's interesting that the Jets have not brought in another punter to help Lachlan Edwards out. Pretty much, Lachlan's the guy. He's got a young leg, and we're going to use it. We're going to ride it. But yeah, I think you're right. Cairo needs to prove that he's still got it, and I think his numbers are quite similar to Catanzaro's. He's not as big, but that doesn't necessarily translate into being a very productive kicker in the NFL. But I like his attitude, and we just need to see him get on the field and air out that leg as he showed that he could do in his first 4 or 5 years in the league.
All right, Randy, appreciate it. Again, we'll be back to talk with you probably right around after the first preseason game, unless there happens to be any startling news between now and then. But the biggest thing about training camp between now and especially those preseason games, we don't want to hear about any injuries. So
that's for sure.
But what should we know, by the way, about practices? Are they practicing with the Redskins? Is that what we heard? And are they going to have a scrimmage?
They're going to. I don't know that there's a scrimmage, but there is going to be. They're going to practice with the Skins for several days leading into their preseason game with Washington.
Okay.
Down there in week 2.
Got it.
So this is a little different too for Todd Bowles. The Jets have done it in the past, but not recently that I recall. And the teaming up with Washington. I think they teamed up with the Giants a few years back in the early 2010s there with Rex Ryan and Tom Coughlin. But this will be interesting to see, and they of course get to see the quarterback they didn't get, Kirk Cousins. But I'm sorry, Kirk has moved on. But they're going to get to see the Redskins, who they're going to play in week 2, and that will be a good test, for the Jets to see, something that they haven't had in previous years recently, which is, as the players always like to say, we get to hit somebody in a different colored jersey this week, so they're going to get to do that the second week of the preseason.
All right, Randy, appreciate it. We'll be talking to you real soon. Look forward to it, and we can follow you on Twitter at @RLangJets. So until then, enjoy training camp, and we'll talk to you soon.
You got it, Greg. Thanks, Jen. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, Randy.
Take care, Randy. That's Randy Lang. And, again, we'll be talking to him. We're skipping to the regular season. We'll be talking to Randy each week, usually somewhere midweek. Give us a couple of days to digest the previous week's games and to get ready for the next week's games. And then if there's any interesting storylines during the week, we'll talk about it. So that's going to be Randy's gig here on Jets FM coming up in the regular season. And, of course, as we mentioned at the Open, Jan, I'm looking forward to doing these post-game shows because I did them a few years ago, and they were fun. It was fun to do them right after games. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing them. Of course, I wouldn't even think of doing them the last couple of years as the way things were, but I think that there's hope now. And I think it's a good time to start doing post-game shows again because I think we'll have a possibility of a 50-50 season, wins and losses. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it should be interesting. Hopefully we see some growth. I think the viewpoint we all have is again, unfortunately, the record to a certain extent is secondary to the growth that we hopefully see out of the younger players, and also probably more importantly, is determining what the path forward for this team is going to be, both in terms of the management and coaching staff and style of play, and then also who's on the roster in terms of who's viewed as just a short-term guy and who's viewed as one of those building blocks. And there's a lot of guys who are, I wouldn't say on the bubble, but they need to provide answers this year in terms of which category they fall into. Is it a guy just for this year or maybe next year, or is it a guy that they think they can build around long-term with a couple of guys like, Leonard Williams, we're expecting to get a long-term deal. Darren Lee's going to be playing for a long-term deal. Hopefully we get to see Sam Darnold. We're assuming we'll see at some point in time during the year, when, still up in the air, but he's going to be a guy that we build around. So we'll have to kind of see what this year, provides, but I think both of us are viewing it as that's kind of the key in terms of what we see of both short-term and long-term and determining what the path forward is for this organization.
Yeah, I just hope it's a fair shot all the way around for these young kids. That's what I want to see. And even if Josh McCown starts for whatever reason, I hope there's a reason. I hope Bridgewater and Darnold don't look very good in the preseason, and they don't deserve the job, just like last year. Because obviously when we saw Petty play, he didn't deserve the job. So as long as that's the case, I'll be okay with it. And I hope that's what we're going to see during training camp in the preseason. So looking forward to it. Again, we'll probably talk at some point, if not the next few weeks, right after the first preseason game. Are you going to any preseason games?
Not as of right now. Usually for me, as you know, they're Friday nights and Saturdays more times than not, so I can't make it. And B, to drive out from Long Island to Jersey, unless for some reason I knew that that Darnold was starting, it'd be interesting to kind of see his first quote-unquote start. That would probably be a driver for me to go out.
That was a bummer when they left Long Island, huh? For you?
Yeah. I mean, again, I had a lot of friends of mine who were here out on the island who lived near me who obviously went to Hofstra a lot when the practices were there.
Yeah.
They used to show up to a lot of the camps and a lot of the other things that they ran. And for me, again, ironically enough, I lived in Jersey growing up as a kid, and I was about 20 minutes away from the Meadowlands as a little kid, which made it a lot easier to go to. And the Jets are
Where were you?
Stadium then, and then. So I lived in West New York, and then North Bergen, and then I was in Fort Lee starting in '88.
I didn't know you grew. I didn't know you were in North Bergen.
Yeah,
I grew up in Union City.
I'm in Jersey, but I went to elementary.
I know you were in Jersey. I mean, I know you were area, but I never knew North Bergen.
My elementary school was on Hudson Street in Jersey, in Union City. So I
Hudson
spent,
Street. Okay. Where was that exactly?
Inside Union City, not that far from the North Bergen border.
I mean, street.
Small school.
Remember the street name?
Yep. So it'll come to me later on.
I was on my house growing up was 13th Street and Bergen Line.
Okay. I mean, again, yeah, I grew up in there. My dad worked in North Bergen on Bergen Line Avenue when I was a kid. So
Yeah.
that's my stomping grounds growing up. And then we moved to Fort Lee when I was in college, and my parents were there for 25, 26 years before they just moved again further into Jersey. So I grew up in Jersey and know it very well in terms of lived on Boulevard East, lived on 70th Street, North Bergen, growing up as a kid. So I mean, for me, as
what
a kid,
street?
growing up
70th?
there was much easier. 70th Street in North Bergen.
Yeah,
Yep.
my dad had a house 81st Street, right off of Tunnelly.
Yep, I was up the block from Tunnelly down 6 hills from one of the main roads and up from US 1, so kind of in between.
Yeah, those are those weird, like when you go up on Tunnelly, like he had that house, of course, where it's like it's like you were going up this like steep embankment, streets. They're like terrible to turn off on and turn off of. But yeah, that's not exactly where you want to have a house, obviously, because my sister's dog got run over on Tunnelly. I mean, you can't let it's not a normal place because of Tunnelly Avenue, but it was a popular place. It was a very fun place to grow up, though. Like the area, there was so much to do.
Yeah, absolutely, and it was a good place growing up as a kid, and lived down 6 hills from Tunnelly, so it was a pretty long walk getting to the bus in the morning and coming home at night, and then obviously another straight down to go to US 1 on the other side of the road. So it was we were in between. So for my dad, it was perfect because he was able to walk about 25 minutes to work every day. So it was a much easier location for him to get to work every day.
All right. So we will talk Jets football again real soon, no later than probably the Monday after the first preseason game. And once that happens, we'll be on every week for sure, and then twice a week when we get into the regular season. So, Jan, appreciate it. Thanks for the extended time, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Looking forward to it. Football is literally a day or so away.
Thank goodness.
We're finally here.
Yes, I can't wait. Thanks, Jan.
Thanks.
All right, that's Jan Levine. And by the way, you could follow Jan on Twitter at AirJan23. So that's his Twitter handle. And thanks for tuning in to this training camp preview edition of Jets FM on EOFN. You can listen to all our on-demand shows on ourlads.com. And, of course, you can also check out the best NFL and college football depth charts in the industry at ourlads.com. And we have all our preseason camp preview interviews available on the Ourlads Football Radio Network. So you can go to the ourlads.com website, check that out. You can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN as in Sports Network. And we send out all of the shows that are available on demand, the interviews, the training camp interviews. We'll be talking college football soon as well, real soon. So a lot going on the OFN here, as well as, of course, this Jet show. So thanks to Randy Lang, Jan Levine, and thanks for tuning in to Jets FM on the OFN. Alpha Mike Foxtrot. I'm Greg DePalma. We'll see you next time.